Hey guys, welcome to GP Fans on YouTube. My name is Luther. As always, I am your host, and welcome ahead of the Austrian Grand Prix. We are back after a week off from Formula One. I don't know about you guys, but this weekend I was a bit bored because my life has nothing if there's no Formula One. But we are back at the Red Bull Ring, which always produces some fireworks in some sort. If you just think back to, for example, last season, Lando Norris and Max Verstappen collide. 2 seasons before that, you had Charles Leclerc overtake Max Verstappen on track countless times. And you've had the previous ones like the 2019 where Max Verstappen came back to overtake Charles Leclerc for the victory very, very late on in the race. It tends to be a race that involves Max Verstappen somehow. So is it going to involve Max Verstappen again? We can only wait and see, but we're going to get into that. And the first thing we can start with is the state of the championship. As always, we have to discuss that because after Canada, after the collision between the two McLaren drivers, Oscar Piastri is starting to eke out a lead. He is now 22 points ahead of Lando Norris. Oscar Piastri is on 198 points. Lando Norris is on 176. Behind them is Max Verstappen, who's 43 points behind Oscar Piastri on 155 points. And George Russell, for some reason, I'm still including in these discussions. Not entirely sure why. He's 62 points behind Oscar Piastri on 136 points. As I said, Oscar Piastri is starting to eke out a lead over Lando Norris, and Lando Norris crashing into the back of him isn't going to help. But the thing is, when you look at the state of play this season, it's been a bit of swings and roundabouts. You know, Oscar Piastri didn't have the best start in Melbourne. Lando Norris has a great start, wins, pole position, nearly bottled it to Max Verstappen if we're being completely truthful, but still got the win. And then Oscar Piastri went on this very strong run of form. You know, he won 3 or 4 races. Max Verstappen had 1 win in there. And then Lando Norris he's had 2 really bad races. Not really bad, but Spain, he was off the pace compared to Oscar Piastri. I think that's Oscar Piastri's best race weekend of his career. Lando Norris just couldn't really touch him. And then the last one, it was desperation from Lando. It reeked of someone that felt like he needed to beat Oscar Piastri, which at that point, there was 15 races left. He didn't necessarily need to beat Oscar Piastri, where he needed to score points, and he didn't. But the 2 races before that, Monaco and Imola, Lando Norris had outperformed Oscar Piastri. He'd closed that gap down to 3 points before Spain, before Oscar Piastri then just dominated that race and extended it back to 10 points, which is now 22 points because of the collision. Obviously, the most recent tough race, like I said, was Lando Norris's fault, but he now knows that he needs to pull a string of solid results together in order to make sure he can compete for the title against his teammate. And like I said, he's got plenty of time to do it. There's 14 races left. And that means that he only has to outscore Piastri by 1.4 points per race. That's not that hard to do. It just requires consistency. It requires him to change his approach. He has to approach it the way he was approaching the end of the season against Max Verstappen, when Max Verstappen was the one that could be careless because Max Verstappen knew that if they collided, it was fine. If they didn't collide and Lando Norris went on to win races, that was the worst thing that could happen for Max. So he went a bit ruthless. Lando Norris needs to know every single point can help him right now. It's not quite at that moment where it's like, I need to win every single race. No, you just need to stay as close as possible. Because if he had finished where he was when they collided, he would have been 12 points behind Oscar Piastri. Instead, he's 22. That's a 10-point swing. He can't be having that. For Max Verstappen, who, as I said, is 43 points behind Oscar Piastri and needs to outscore him by 31 points per race. And George Russell, who, as I said, is 62 points behind Oscar Piastri, needs to outscore him by 4.4 points per race. It is going to be very hard. And I struggle to see a way for them back into the championship. Both drivers need consistent wins and they don't have the machinery to give them the ability to get those consistent wins. And even maybe a DNF from both the McLaren drivers. That's going to be very, very difficult for George Russell and Max Verstappen because Oscar Piastri is on the type of streak you'd expect to see from a 10-year Formula One veteran. So Oscar Piastri, in his first season in Formula One, got lapped twice at the Brazilian Grand Prix in 2023. He has finished every single lap of every single race since that point, meaning he has not crashed, he's not had any reliability issues, and he's not been lapped since that race. The following weekend, he was out of the points in Las Vegas. He has finished inside points or scored points in the sprint race in the times that he's finished outside the points. For example, Miami last season, he scored points in the sprint race. He has scored points in every single weekend since Las Vegas in 2023. 36 race streak. The third longest streak in Formula One history and the longest active streak in Formula One. When you have the ability to score points consistently like that, you're not crashing out like Lando did in Canada. You're not having moments where you bicker with Max Verstappen and end up colliding like Lando did in Austria last season. It's going to be impossible for him to drop points unnecessarily and have those other drivers catch up with him because he's that much of a smooth operator. Not to steal Carlos Sainz's nickname, but he is that much of a reliable, consistent point scorer. It's going to be really hard for those guys that are that far behind the 43 points that Max Verstappen is, the 62 points that George Russell is. It's going to be very hard for them to catch up with Oscar Piastri unless they are winning all the time, because he is going to be scoring all the time. Which leads me to think that it is just between him and Lando Norris. And because he's such a smooth operator, because he is so level-headed and Lando isn't, Lando's frankly the opposite, I can't see a way back for him either. And I think with that maturity at such a young age, Oscar Piastri is very likely going to be the champion this season, unless there is a monumental collapse. And someone agrees with that, even though I'm going to completely disagree with them. Ralf Schumacher, as Nicholas pointed out in one of his news videos on our channel that you can check out, Ralf Schumacher has said to Sky Germany that he expects Piastri to be prioritized by McLaren for the rest of the season. Now, whilst I do think Piastri is going to be the champion, and whilst I do believe that Piastri is the better McLaren driver, and I believe that Piastri's had the higher potential since he entered Formula One over Lando Norris, I don't understand why McLaren would do that, and that's why I don't think Ralf Schumacher is right. If Max Verstappen was the person that was 22 points behind Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris was the one that was 43 points behind Max Verstappen, I would completely understand why McLaren would do that. However, that's not the case. Lando Norris is 22 points behind Oscar Piastri. Lando Norris, with several race wins and poor weekends from Oscar Piastri, could be right back in the title fight. And so I don't see a reason why McLaren could, without causing a civil war, prioritize Oscar Piastri, start telling Lando to move over, start giving Piastri favorable strategic calls. It wouldn't make sense in this current climate, in this current title battle, and I have to disagree with Ralf in this situation. The only way I can see his point is if he is referencing future title battles. For example, say next season they're battling with another team. Say, for my sake, Ferrari are the ones battling with them next season in 2026, or Mercedes, because we all hear about this good stuff about the Mercedes engine. This season, where the competition isn't really there for them, and the two drivers are pretty much in a position where they are just battling with each other, and Oscar Piastri ends up beating Lando Norris convincingly, this season might allow McLaren to be able to make the decision earlier. Oh, we're going to be in a close battle with McLaren, with Mercedes, or with Ferrari, or with Red Bull. We're going to have to prioritize one of our drivers. Who's given us proof that we can prioritize, that they are good enough to battle for a championship? Oh, Oscar Piastri. We're going to go for him. But for this season, I don't think McLaren should prioritize either driver. They've got both championships pretty much. Well, the Constructors is locked up, but the Drivers' Championship is all but locked up. If it doesn't go to McLaren driver, something bad has really gone wrong. I just think they have the performance advantage over the other teams to allow their drivers to battle. I just personally think that the drivers probably now know more than ever, because they've definitely had a word with them, that it cannot end how Canada ended. That's the one rule. You cannot allow the races to end how Canada ended. because that easily could have been a double DNF. That could have been a lot worse than just Lando Norris being crashed out. That could have easily ended with Oscar Piastri having severe damage and being out of the race as well. A company in Formula One that seems to have endless amount of damage is Alpine, because following the Canadian Grand Prix, I think it was actually during the Grand Prix, the Renault CEO, Luca De Meo, resigned from his post, and his resignation will take effect on the 15th of July. De Meo is responsible for rebranding Renault in an effort to Alpine, in an effort to place sharper focus on the French manufacturer's smaller brands. Under him, Renault and Alpine have had an absolute revolving door of senior personnel. We've talked about it on this podcast before, the massive list of Bruno Famin, etc., Ollie Oaks that have been there, that have gone, and now at this moment we have Flavio Briatore at the helm. It's been a failed project. After saving Lotus, it's not been the revival, like the historic times that we saw under Fernando Alonso or the Benetton days with Michael Schumacher. Besides Esteban Ocon's sole victory at the Hungary Grand Prix, it's really been just disappointment. You know, you add in the fact that they lost Oscar Piastri and Fernando Alonso within weeks of each other. It's just been pure mess for Alpine, and we've not been shy about talking about it specifically on our long form videos. It's not been good enough for Alpine, and this creates more uncertainty at the top, because I have to mention the fact that Flavio Briatore was hired as De Meo's advisor. Flavio Briatore is not technically an Alpine employee. He technically is someone that's been independently hired by De Meo to advise him with regards to the F1 project. You know, resigning the works team profile, becoming a Mercedes engine customer from 2026 onwards. These are decisions that these two guys have made, and they're leaving ahead of it. The decisions that are going to lose multiple people their jobs, which is crazy to me. And now he's running away to go to a luxury brand. I'm a bit put off by that, to be honest with you, because I think that's quite a big deal to make such a harsh decision that's been taken so negatively, run a team that's as famous as Renault in Formula One to the ground, and then leave. Not a fan of it. And I could genuinely see at a point Renault being sold and no longer being in F1. But the reason I bring up Briatore is because his future is uncertain. As I said, he is De Meo's advisor. He is not an Alpine employee. So with De Meo's exit, Briatore has said he expects nothing to change. But one could only assume that stuff is going to change because you are an independent employee. And he is currently leading the Alpine project. He is currently, in effect, but without the title, team principal. Yet, not being someone that's in Alpine's books, technically. It doesn't make sense. And it's more proof of Alpine being run so poorly. It's more proof of Alpine being, to be blunt, a clown show. And I think for the history of the sport, like I said, Schumacher first two titles. Like I said, Fernando Alonso first two titles, his only two titles coming at this team. You know, we've seen Kimi Räikkönen in that car. We've seen some of the best drivers in Formula One, in modern Formula One history, drive for that team. Kimi Räikkönen, obviously, when they were Lotus, it's the same lineage. I know Lotus, Renault, well, they were Lotus, Renault, so you can still say it. But it's a sad ending. It's a sad ending. And to be honest with you, frankly, right now, the way they're being run is pathetic. And it's wasting the talents of a great driver in Pierre Gasly, losing the talents of a great driver before he could even get an F1 in Oscar Piastri. It might be, unfortunately, for the best that they are moved on to someone that will run them significantly better. I mean, there's so many rich brands that are so eager to be in Formula One. it might be best that we see them in Formula One instead of this leadership team, or Renault hire better leadership groups, because it's getting to the point where I can't remember the last season where we didn't have a huge exit, if not multiple. I think every season since 2020, maybe even 2019, we've had multiple senior personnel at Renault leave mid-season. Crazy. But we'll see how they get on in Austria. Austria's coming up. I love the Red Bull Ring circuit. It's just simplistic. It's always quite good because it's quite easy to follow. I think it's 2/3 of the track are inside DRS. So you always have this idea. You see a lot of teammates be like, oh, I'm faster than him. No, mate, you're just in DRS for over half of the lap. So it's very easy to keep close to someone. So we should see some battling. And in a season where dirty air has made it impossible to follow, 2/3 of the race being under DRS should help that. So we'll see, and I will be here next weekend to discuss whatever happens. It's been a pleasure as always. I've been Luther. See you guys next time. Peace.